Is anybody out there? Anybody?
We are College Hill Farm. Welcome back to College Hill Farm. Today we're continuing our series on casual and complementary prepping, and we're discussing how do you get started. Well, getting started at prepping doesn't have to be an expensive thing, but what you have to be ready for. There might be a flood, work disruption. You know, you're going to be laid off for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. You know how that is. You see it today already. Some kind of strike that might happen. A war. There's a whole bunch of things that you could be prepping for. A lot of preppers are very specific. They might live near a volcano, or they might live in town, and they're very specific about what they prep. So I want to talk today about what a prepper is. A prepper is somebody who is ready for whatever life's going to throw at them. Now, that means that they're ready in case the power goes off for 2 weeks. They're ready in case there's a flood or a tornado or some kind of weather-related event. They're ready in case they lose their job. They have the stores stored up to eat for an extended period of time and do without money or other social interaction for an extended period of time, whatever that is. It might be 2 weeks, it might be a month, it might be 6 months, it might be a year. So a prepper is somebody that's just ready for whatever might happen, civil unrest, or there are a whole bunch of scenarios, and I'm not going to spend my time trying to go over every one of those. Some preppers are extreme and concentrate on home defense and maybe offense. Some of them don't plan to store up anything, plan to take what they want. There are those. There are some preppers, and I don't necessarily consider those preppers. Okay, I've got another word for them, but I'll leave that to you. But most preppers are decent, hard-working people who look at the situation in the country, in the world, and they go, you know, something's kind of off. My kids and me need to look at a way that we can keep going when others are running amok. So that's one of the things that we want to talk about today. And getting started prepping doesn't have to be expensive. You know, you can start out for being prepped for 2 weeks, and let's talk about that. I was raised in Appalachia. That means that Appalachian style prepping is a little different. It's just a lifestyle. Crystal and I, if you follow our channel, we raise what we eat, we grow food, we prepare it, we can it, we freeze it, we dehydrate it, we do all kinds of things like that because that was what we were raised doing. You know, Crystal wasn't raised doing that, but her grandparents and things, they did that. My grandparents did it, Mom and Dad did it, my great-grandparents did it. It was just an Appalachian style lifestyle. So they looked at things and made it through the Depression because they had a local food source, they raised their own stuff, but not everybody has that opportunity. So if we're going to talk about food supply, the very first thing you have to talk about is water. Okay? Water is one of those things that is going to be super important in the case of something going wrong. You need, for every person, just drinking water, you need 1 gallon a day in case in case you want to store up and be ready. So for 2 people to be ready to have drinking water in case of a 2-week event, you need 28 gallons of water. That's a lot. Now, some people won't drink that much water. Some people will substitute cola. Anything with liquid can be substituted in there. But for a 2-week period, and we're going to talk about prepping for a 2-week period to begin with. Okay? We're going to talk about prepping for a 2-week period. It doesn't have to be expensive. Now, water. That water that you're going to put up, that 28 gallons, you can store water right out of your tap as long as you keep it in a dark place. Okay? You can store water right out of your tap as long as you keep it in a dark place. Now, well water will be a little different. You might need to put a few drops of Clorox in your well water to do that. Go by CDC guidelines. You can go on the CDC website and they give you guidelines for storing water. This is not what I'm here about. This is about helping you start to prep. How do you store this water fiscally responsible? Well, you can go to the dollar store if you want and buy 1-gallon dollar jugs. So for $28 you can have 2 weeks worth of water stored up. But what if you don't have $28? You live in the city, you don't have $28. Now, how do you store that much water, 28 gallons, and put it in containers? Well, one of the easiest ways is to each day make a stop by the local laundromat. What you're going to find Clorox jugs. When people get done with their Clorox, they dump it out. Those are 1-gallon Clorox jugs. Some of them are half-gallon. You know, you can read the label and figure out what they are. But you can get those Clorox jugs, rinse them out, and it's a free capped water jug. So then you can fill it out of the tap. You already pay your water bill. You know, if you've got municipal water, you've already paid your electric bill if you've got a well. So you can put that water in those used Clorox jugs, store them under the bed or in the garage. But now if you store them in the garage, they're liable to freeze. So you got to pay attention to that. You want to store them in a place where they're not going to freeze and they're not going to get too hot. The hotter they get, the less time they'll last. But now most water will get a little stale in storage like that. Okay? So, and it will taste stale. But most of the time all it needs is a little aeration. You can bring it out, pour it in an open container, and take a whisk or anything and get some air distributed into that water and let it set so it absorbs a little air, and it will taste just like it did when it came out of your tap. Now the next thing you need to look at when it comes to preparing for some type of emergency is medicine. If you are a diabetic, you have high blood pressure, birth control, there are all number of things that you need to consider when you're considering being prepared for a 2-week span or a month or 6 months or a year. So you have to consider that here in the United States, not all of our medicine is made here. So it might be one of those things that another country controls the medicine supply, and they might be having unrest or anything that would disrupt that medicine supply. So you need to have your medicine or alternatives built into your system. And they need to be such that you're not letting your medicine get old. As medicine ages, some medicines are good for a long time. Some medicines deteriorate over time. So you have to plan for those kinds of things. One way to do for the 2 weeks, if your insurance company, most of them will allow you to pick up your medicine a week early. Okay? So if you do that, You pick up a week early. You still got a week of your old supply, and now you have an extra week. Well, if the next month, if you pick up a week early again, okay, you see what's happening? You're adding weeks onto your medicine supply. But keep using the oldest as you go through, and you've added 2 or 3 weeks to your medicine supply in a few months. Does that make sense? You can also talk to your doctor about giving you a 3-month supply. And you can go ahead and go to the pharmacy, and your insurance will generally pay for a 3-month supply. It might be one of those things where they want you to use their pharmacy and do mail order, but doing it that way, you get a 3-month supply of your medication, and your 2 weeks are covered that way. But never let that get short, okay? Don't wait till the last week to fill that medication. Put it on autofill if you can. Some people can't afford 3 months worth of their medication at once. A medication that I take is $750 for the first month until I meet the deductible of my insurance. And my deductible is $1,500. So in 2 months I've met my deductible. But I digress. Insurance is a thing that you have to work with and work around in storing your medication if you're wanting to be a prepper. Our current situation has shown many people that they need to have a supply of food built up. They need to have a supply of toilet paper. They need to have a supply of paper towels. They need to have a supply of those common, ordinary things that they use every day. Now, shortages can occur locally. Gasoline might be one of those things that gets in short supply. There's going to be a whole lot of different things that you need to look at. But right now, let's look at food. Food for 2 weeks for everybody in the house. Now, you can go out and buy these 5-gallon containers of food. You know, and they say, well, this is a month's worth of food for one person. Or 2 months worth of food. Have you ever eaten some of that stuff? You'd be out protesting too if you had to rely on that stuff to eat, okay? A lot of folks in your family will revolt. When you plan for your 2-week food supply, plan on food that you and your family will eat. Okay? Buying food that you won't eat is a little on the crazy side. Okay? If you buy this box of food that you're really just not going to eat, it tastes bad, it's nutritious, it might meet your nutritional needs, but you'd be better off eating the box. As far as flavor goes, you're probably not going to eat it. And in severe things that are going on, sometimes people will have a hard time eating. They'll especially not be able to eat those things that they find revolting. Not everybody's going to be willing to have a possum for dinner. Okay, they're going to draw the line at some things, and they won't eat. So, on a 2-week type thing, buy things that you would normally do. For example, when you go to the store, buy double. Okay, if you normally for a 2-week period have macaroni and cheese for 3 nights out of that, buy 6 boxes instead of 3 boxes. If you have peanut butter, if you buy a jar of peanut butter a week, well, instead of buying 2 jars of peanut butter, buy 4. You see where I'm going? that way you have your 2 weeks that you're normally going to eat on, but you've doubled, so you now have a month's supply. Okay, it's a straightforward kind of thing. It does double your grocery bill, but save other places, because it's going to be important to you. People didn't realize that the store shelves were going to get gone with things like disinfecting wipes, alcohol. You can't buy alcohol anywhere in the county where I live. You can't buy disinfecting wipes anywhere in the county where I live. You can't buy bread in a lot of places. Now, we've got bread here in the county. Our local grocery store is able to get bread, and we can buy bread. Storing bread is one of those things you can store it in a freezer. It might be that time to go out and find that freezer that you were looking for. You know, even apartments can buy little freezers, 5 cubic feet, 4 cubic feet, small freezers that will hold an awful lot of food, and for very little electrical investment. Now, if the power goes off, freezers aren't going to last a long time. Okay, just be prepared for that, and think about how you're going to run that freezer if the power goes out. You know, it might be as simple as an extra car battery and a power inverter that you charge the battery with your car, and then come in and keep your little freezer running. Okay, that might be something that you want to look into. That's not the purpose of this video today. There are all kinds of things that you need to add to your preps as you go, but you have to start off small. Let's say that for 2 people, you spend normally $50 every 2 weeks in staples. Okay, you can buy staples, beans and potatoes, and okay, $50 every 2 weeks. You may spend $100 every 2 weeks. Well, try and save up and plan for that extra $100 to buy that second 2 weeks worth. That way you've got a month's worth of groceries in the house at any one time, and if something happened, you've got 30 days to figure out what you're going to do, or 28 days. You've got 28 days to figure out what it is you want to do and what comes next. Okay, you've got a month's worth of food, 2 months worth of food saved up. You're ready to start on the next part of your prep. Well, the next part depends on where you live. First off, there are going to be laws and regulations that you have to follow for where you live. I'm not telling anybody to break any laws or regulations. That's not what this channel is about. This is about doing what's best for you, and how do you move into that thing. Now, preppers are different types. Me and Crystal, we're too old to put on a backpack and trek 250 miles to our bug out location. I'm too old for that crap. That's just not going to happen. I've got too many other problems that's going to preclude that, so I'm bugged in. If something happens, I'm going to be right here where my security and stores are. So if that's the case, you have to be prepared to defend what you have. Now, Crystal and I are prepared for almost anything. Okay, and it's not because we're how do I say it? It's not because that we're into guns, glory, and all that. No, no. We're just prepared for anything. I learned to hunt when I was 8 years old. You know, I killed my first squirrel at 8. My first rabbit probably at 9. Okay? So if you think about those kinds of things, I've been hunting all my life. Trapping and different stuff. But now, you can't rely on hunting Let me say that again. You can't rely on hunting. History tells us that hunting is not a reliable source for survival. Because here's why I say that. In the late 1700s, Kentucky was being settled at a little fort by the name Fort Boonesborough. Now, while that was going on, there was an influx of settlers coming to the fort. Of course, there were Native Americans and there were Indian skirmishes and fights, and there were all these things. But the one thing that settlers had to understand when they came to the fort, they had to bring enough food to last them a year. They basically had a year of starvation because around the fort all the wild game had been hunted out. And imagine Kentucky in the late 1700s, the late 18th century. There were all kinds of game here when Daniel Boone came. But by the time people started arriving, the game was erased. It's one of the reasons the Native Americans didn't like us coming here, was we erased all the wildlife. So as people came in, they used guns and different things, and they hunted out all the wildlife to extinction. Well, in a local area that has a modest population, the wildlife will be hunted out in a short order. So don't think that hunting is going to supply you with everything you need. We talked about hunting and defense, and the reason I lump hunting in with defense is they both have to use methods that are similar. Okay, and I just put hunting in with defense. There are a lot more defense experts out there than me, and I'll leave them to give you advice on defense. You can study that. One of the things that preppers do, we study. We study, we practice, we study, we practice. We think about what we're going to do if this happens. Okay, we're real good at the thought experiment. Some are and some aren't, but you could get really good at the thought experiment. The next thing you need to think about is a first aid kit. You need to have something in your home that acts as a first aid kit, and there needs to be a whole bunch of stuff in there. There needs to be stuff for fevers, colds. You need to have stuff for wounds, for stopping bleeding. There's a whole bunch of things that need to be in your first aid kit. Something for burns. Okay, just having that at home is a great thing, and it's kind of a necessity if you have kids. You want to have a thermometer, a blood pressure cuff, and learn how to use it. Okay, a thermometer and a blood pressure cuff. You can't buy a thermometer within 100 miles of me today because of the coronavirus. You can't buy a thermometer within 100 miles of here. But if you have them already, you don't have to worry so much about that. Okay? So have a stocked first aid kit. Always keep one. And check it every little bit to make sure that everything is still in date. Okay? If you've got ibuprofen or Tylenol or Aleve or whatever your preferred analgesic, then check it. Some preppers store up antibiotics. They buy animal grade antibiotics and animal grade medicines. And I'm not going to tell you how to stock your first aid kit. I'm going to leave that up to you because you need to study. Study. Read everything that you can read. And take everything with a grain of salt. Not everybody on the internet is giving good advice. Okay? Let me say that again. Not everybody on the internet is giving good advice. Some people will tell you that vinegar you can use vinegar to clean up for this coronavirus thing. Vinegar is not an antiseptic. Let me say that again. Vinegar is not an antiseptic. Vinegar is a great acidic cleaner, but it's not antiseptic. Vinegar is made by bacteria. So get that first aid kit. That should be one of the first things that you look at. Get that first aid kit, get it prepared, and get it in a place where you can get to it. A bug out bag, or what some people call a get home bag. Let's start with that. A bug out bag. A bug out bag is something that you're planning to leave where you're at. I don't plan to leave where I am, but I keep a few things stored up just in case something happens. What if a tornado hit my place and the house is gone? I'm going to have to go somewhere and do something. Okay? So I try and keep a certain amount of things that I can replace and get ready to, in case we have to leave, in case we have to go to a hotel or go to a shelter or whatever. That stuff is going to happen, or it can happen. So you need to be prepared for that. You know, keep a container where it would be quick that you could load something into it and be gone. In that container, you need to have things like Tylenol or ibuprofen or something like that. You need to have a flashlight. You need to have maybe a little rain poncho. You need to have a whole bunch of small things that will be sufficient for you to carry, and something sufficient for you to eat while you travel. If you plan for that bug out bag to be good for 2 days, you should be okay. You can keep one in your car. You know, what if something happened and you had to get home, but the roads were all blocked and your only way to get home is to walk? It might take you 2 days to get home. You know, some people work an hour away. If you drive an hour to work, if you drive 30 minutes to work, it may take you 2 days to get home. If you drive an hour to work, it might take you 5 days to get home. So plan for that and keep something in your car that if you had to be walking for 5 days, you would have something to keep you going, something to eat, you know, some nutrition bars, things that are going to keep so that you could get back to the people you love. Have one of those. It's one of those things that would be good for you to do that. Have some way of contacting folks. Have some way of signaling an emergency. You know, in your car you need to keep a road flare. You need to keep a flag in case of emergency, or something that you could use to flag people down. You need to keep a jack and a spare. You need to keep something to eat. You need to keep a blanket. If you live in an inclement climate, you need to keep a blanket. Even if you live in a climate that's not inclement, you still need to keep a blanket. You also need to keep those essentials, a mini first aid kit. Okay? Keep something in your car so that if something happened while you're at work, you could still get home. Or let's say your car breaks down in the snow and nobody can get to you for a day. Make it so that you can spend the night in your car, okay, till somebody can come get you. Does that make sense? It's just one of those things you need to be prepared for that. Okay, let's talk about a long-term food supply. We're talking about 6 months to a year. It's one of those things that you have to work up to. You know, you can't go out. Well, you can. If you've got a lot of money, you can go out and buy a year's worth of food and store it. But it's one of those things that you'll work your way up to. What we've talked about so far, you had 2 weeks worth of food, you got an additional 2 weeks, so you got a month's worth of food. One of the best things that you can do when you start prepping is to keep a diary. And keep a diary of everything you put in your mouth. Okay? Because one of the hardest things that's going to happen when we have a SHTF situation is coming to grips with what we have and what we had. Okay? People are going to have a psychological problem of looking at, oh, I had this, it was so great, but now all I've got's this. I'm so sad. I'm so depressed. I'm so worried. I'm so... Okay? The whole idea of prepping is so that sad, worried, disconcerted, all those things are behind you. Okay? You focused on what you need, and you need to move forward. Well, you've planned for that, so you're ready to move forward. So start a diary. In that diary, you write down everything that you ate or consumed this week, today, everything today. And at the end of the week, tabulate it. What all did we eat? Multiply that by 52, and there's a year's worth of food. And it won't be a little bit. All right? It won't be a little bit. We have 4 freezers. We have a large pantry area that we store our canned vegetables and things like that, dried food, and when I say dried food, it's stuff that we dried and vacuum sealed, or okay. I'm not talking about going out and buying all this. Now we store our own. I feel like the ultimate prepper is the person who can replenish their stocks. You know, you save for a year and eat for a year, but if you can replenish your stock the next year without having to go to the grocery store, that's a whole different animal. Save up a year's worth of food. Now, in that diary, you write down all that kind of stuff. You write down, even when you're in the middle of shit hits the fan. You're in the middle of it, and you need to keep that diary. Okay? It will remind you of how you felt about things, how you reacted to things, what your failures were. Okay? It'll remind you. Humans tend to forget their failures as they move forward, because that has to be behind you. You've got to get on with it. They tend to forget their failures. But if you write them down, then you can go back later and go, I didn't have enough gasoline to keep my generator going for a month. So that's something that I should look at. I felt really bad that I didn't have M&Ms. Maybe I could put back a store of M&Ms and have at least 6 months worth that I could ration out. You see where I'm going? But get a store of vitamins too. I know. You're going to say, well, vitamins just give you expensive pee. That's what doctors say. Vitamins just give you expensive pee. But some vitamins, in places where there's a lack of certain nutrients, a vitamin can make all the difference in the world. Like you're raising goats. If your land is not sufficient in copper, you have to bolus them copper. Okay? Selenium might be the same way. Depends on how deficient your land is. So you have to look at these different things for yourself, for your animals, and don't forget those pets. You know, if you're storing up 6 months worth of food, you need to store up 6 months worth of food for your pet, or else your pet is going to be deficient in what they need. Pet food is designed to give them all the vitamins and minerals that they're supposed to have. So if your pet is eating the same thing you do, they may not get sufficient vitamins and minerals for what they need. So you need to store up for them as well. The final thought here is you want to work up until you have a year's worth of food. A year's worth of food will give you a security that you don't have to worry about what comes down the pike. You need to have a way to defend what you have. You need a first aid kit. You need to have your medicine in such a way that you have an alternative if everything goes to pieces. Some folks are just going to die. If they can't have access to their medicine, some people are just going to die. And that's going to be the way that is. There are conditions that require certain medicines, and if you can't obtain them, that person is not going to make it. So I don't want to see us go back to the 18th century medicine, but it could go back to 18th century medicine. So be prepared for that kind of thing. Look at possible medications that you could create. And I'm not talking about buying them. I'm talking about wildcrafting and things like that, that you might be able to help yourself limp through and make it a little bit further. But by and large, the modern medicine and the pills we take may very well be what takes most preppers out. Be ready for that. Be prepared for that. Have your family prepared for that. It's just one of those things. Have water stored up. Have at least 2 weeks worth of water. You're better off if you got a month. And a way to replenish it. Rainwater is fine to replenish with. You can boil it, sterilize it, store it. So if something happens, you've got all these jugs from where you had water, you can grab rainwater, boil it, sterilize it, put a few drops of Clorox in it and store it. Go by the CDC recommendations. Print out. Let me say that again. The internet is wonderful. But if the electricity goes down, the internet is gone. Gone, 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 gone. Okay? So if the electrical grid went down, the internet's out. Your computer will be absolutely useless to you as an information device. Hard copy. Hard copy will be your friend. Buy a book on survival. Buy a book on gardening. Buy a book. Book. Not, how do I say it? Not, what are those tablets that you can buy? A Kindle. Not a Kindle. Buy a book. A book. You know, so that when and if things go awry, there's a manual. Print off things that are important, like the CDC requirements, CDC recommendations for sterilizing water. Alright? Do that. Use a book. There's nothing wrong with being smart. Use a book. If you like this kind of stuff, this homestead and do-it-yourself prepping kind of thing, be certain to come on out to our channel and subscribe. When you get to the channel, if you hit the little bell, it'll notify you when we upload a video. We upload videos 1, sometimes 5, just depends on what's going on in our homestead that week. And now, with that being said, it's time for me to get on to the next thing.